Hello, I'm Marcia Cavanaugh. Thanks so much for joining us. If the local COVID news could be briefly summarized, it might be some improvements, but not good enough. This week, we saw that verdict being applied to schools and public events. We'll try tonight to make sense of where we're heading. We'll also look at politics now that the national tickets are decided and who has what connections locally, as well as several municipal elections. At the Hard Rock demolition site, delicate recovery work continues while there are still questions about the status of a legal investigation. There are high hopes and serious issues about the Carnival season, and the Saints will be playing some of their biggest games in empty stadiums. All of this is subject for discussion with tonight's Informed Sources. Errol Laborde, producer of Informed Sources. LeBron Joseph, news anchor, WGNO, Channel 26. Stephanie Grace, columnist, the Times-Picayune, the New Orleans Advocate. And John Zimmerman, reporter, the Times-Picayune, the New Orleans Advocate. We go over to LeBron first, and we do our weekly COVID update. So how are we looking this week, and what's the governor and the mayor saying about it?
Well, you said it all with pretty good and moving forward, but not good enough. Yeah. All parishes, with the exception of Plaquemines, which is showing a slight increase, but all parishes are showing a trending down in positivity, which is really, really good. In fact, the parish doing best is the one that was doing worse in the very beginning. We're talking about Orleans. The positivity rate in Orleans Parish is clocked now at 4.1%, which is not only below the 10% that a lot of folks are trying to get under, but certainly below the 5% that the CDC considers a hot spot. The regions are kind of interesting as well. The North Shore region with St. Tammany and Tangipahoa and Washington is the region that's the most cases per day, if you will, at 105, and that's the average of the last 7 days. Region 1, which is Orleans and Jefferson, still doing some pretty big numbers, but Jefferson is kind of leading the bus with that, with Orleans being lower. And the Bayou region is also, even though the population is lower than, say, in Orleans Parish, the Bayou region is trending third behind Jefferson and the North Shore.
You're saying we're looking a little bit better. I mean, that certainly is positive news, but of course the governor has said don't plan on moving out of phase 2
before
the end of this month. I mean, he's still doing it, saying, with a big word of caution.
Yeah.
And we did hear from the city, New Orleans City Health Director earlier this week, too. What's her assessment?
Well, Dr. Vigno is just, her thing more than anything is let's keep doing what we're doing. We understand that the numbers are really good. We know what's going on. But Dr. Vigno has kind of underscored that the environment that we're in now, we continue to do what we are doing. If the numbers in Orleans continue to look the way they look, then that date of just after Labor Day looks pretty good in terms of being able to get kids back into the classroom in Orleans Parish. This week was the start of school for a lot of the Orleans Parish public schools as well. Mm-hmm. Yes, they're all virtual. My kid, 8th grader, he's virtual as well. But more than anything, that's what they're saying. I found it interesting earlier this week that the governor put out there that bars could apply for the conditional permits to operate as restaurants, if you will, which certainly helps a lot of those bars because these guys were given no option once the takeouts were given as well.
Right. Yeah, it's been really difficult for them. A couple of issues here as it relates to where we stand with COVID, and you mentioned one, that's schools, and the other is unemployment insurance. Let's we mentioned schools, let's quickly go to schools. Because some schools are saying quarantine some, we're closing up. It's an unknown situation with that.
Yeah, the schools one is interesting because, one kid testing positive can shut down an entire institution. We've seen that happen in some of the pre-Ks and all that. As it relates to unemployment, however, Marcia, the president signs the executive order allowing for $400, which is lower than the $600 that folks were getting. But of that $400, $300 would be given by the feds and $100 by the states. And immediately heard states saying, hey, hang on a second, we're in a really tight situation and we just can't afford this. Here, Governor Edwards, when he spoke about it, and he's spoken about it at every one of his pressers this week, he's, sort of painted different pictures in terms of, well, maybe we could use $100 of the FEMA money, or maybe $100 of what the state would give someone already already. There was also the report that a number of people in Louisiana wouldn't qualify for the $400 because they wouldn't be getting the $100 that the state would be giving. It's a very confusing situation. I think none of this is etched in stone, and I think what we all were hoping, or what a lot of folks were hoping, was that the legislature, was that our national elected officials in the Senate and in the House would be able to figure this out prior to us having to get to this point. But now the Senate has gone on vacation for 2 weeks, so that won't save this situation.
So basically what the governor is saying then, it's potentially, if things get resolved, those who are eligible for unemployment could be getting the state unemployment plus $300 on top of that. And they're hoping that that extra $100 that the president had talked about and wants the state to cough up would come from the existing unemployment benefits.
The existing benefits, exactly.
Okay, but we don't know if and when that could happen. Stephanie, let me ask you, is the House on recess also? Do you know, House of Representatives, or are they in session? Do you know?
I'm not. I think they are. I'm not.
I think they are too. Okay,
but I know the Senate. But remember, they did pass a. They passed a bill back in May to address this that included the full 600. So they've been waiting for the counteroffer all this time.
So basically, we're left waiting.
Let me add one.
Go ahead.
We're left waiting, and let me just add to what LeBron said. The governor said very clearly, we have the money to do this for a couple weeks. That's it. Because again, the state trust fund is running low too. So he really called on Congress to come back and, get moving, as many other governors are.
Okay. All righty. Well, thanks a lot, LeBron. And, we just have to continue to see how things roll along. Speaking of rolling along, what about parades, for the next Carnival season in 2021, Errol?
Well, first of all, just to be clear, and it's a technicality, there will definitely be a Mardi Gras next year. But Mardi Gras is a day on the calendar. But the question is, will there be Carnival parades? And that's still the issue. Yesterday, there were two meetings, and a lot of people were hoping that something definitive would come out of one of them. One of them was a meeting of the city's advisory committee, which consists largely of crew captains. At the same time, it just so happened that yesterday, the governor was having his press conference, and someone asked about Carnival and what he thought. And so what we've learned from the meetings, first of all, from the advisory committee, they pretty much said they don't know yet. They don't have enough information. They did form a subcommittee, which was more of a health-related committee, to advise them on any health issues in making decisions. I mean, obviously, everybody in the Mardi Gras committee wants to have parades, but they're certainly very sensitive to the health issues, and so they know that they have to keep an eye on this. But I think most revealing was when the governor was asked about it. His position all along has been one that's very sensible. It goes back to last April when there was talk about, will there be Carnival? And he said, look, it's too early to tell. And that was last April. And pretty much that was his answer yesterday. He says we just have to wait and see. He said he knows that there are a lot of crew captains who have to start making financial decisions now, as far as building your floats and recruiting your riders and doing all the things that you need, that he knows that. And he wishes he could give them information, but he just can't, that the information is not there. And so it's going to be a few months before we know anything, and then at that point, you have to make a decision. What I think might have been a little encouraging is that the crew captains don't seem to be bailing out. One TV station interviewed the president of Endymion, and he says, look, we're building our floats, we've got our riders, we've got 3,000 riders all booked, and so there's no crew captain that has bailed out yet. And even though it's going to be a very cautious thing, Carnival has faced tight situations before. In 2006, coming after Katrina, there was a big decision. If you figure that Katrina was in August and September of 2005, then along comes Carnival time. So there wasn't much turnaround. And there was talk maybe you shouldn't have Carnival parades, but they had them, even though some of them were truncated. I remember there was one of those weekend parades where 2 or 3 parades just kind of combined their resources. And that year after Katrina, they were dealing with physical damage, which in a sense was a bigger problem than the problem of presenting a parade that we have. Of course, the problem here is a health problem, which I guess trumps everything else. But in terms of the parades being ready, of having some semblance of a parade, it would be less of a problem. So now it's just a question of waiting and see what they find. I think the Carnival establishment is ready. I know the business community wants it. Lieutenant Governor Nungaster is out been advising. And I think any political person, if they can deliver on it and it makes sense and it doesn't cause any kind of damage, we'll certainly want to go ahead with it.
And Jefferson Parish, they're planning to go ahead?
Jefferson Parish this week actually announced their schedule for this week. And I think that's what kind of prompted the question to the governor, because there was a reporter who was saying, well, Jefferson Parish has announced their schedule. Haven't heard from Orleans. What do you think? And the response from Jefferson Parish is it's pretty much the same schedule they had last year. I think what's in the back of people's minds was in 1979 when there was a police strike in New Orleans and all the parades were canceled in New Orleans, but several parades, I think it was 7 of them, moved to Jefferson Parish. And so there is precedent for Orleans Parish parades moving to Jefferson Parish for 1 year. But of course, this is a different situation from a police strike. I mean, this is a health issue. But I think that's going to always be on the table.
Go ahead.
I should say I interviewed Cynthia Lee Sheng, the parish president of Jefferson, a while back, and asked her if she envisioned a scenario where you could have Jefferson and not Orleans. And in fact, apparently some Orleans crews have been calling over to Jefferson to, see if that's a possibility. At the time, she said no, that's not what she wanted to do. She thought it should be a regional decision.
Mm-hmm.
So
okay, and we shall see what that decision will be. Thanks a lot, E. And Stephanie, we're staying with you because in presidential politics, I have some local connections to the tickets.
Yeah. Well, obviously, we have a vice presidential nominee, not a formal nominee, but future nominee on the Democratic side, Kamala Harris. That's how it's pronounced for those still figuring it out. California senator. She was a former presidential candidate, of course, and she came to New Orleans a couple times when she was running to speak, interestingly, largely to African-American groups, specifically African-American female groups. Since she came for Essence, she came a couple other times, and she got to know a couple of local politicians who signed on as her state co-chairs when she was still running. One is Helena Moreno, the city council member from New Orleans, and the other is Ted James, who's a legislator from Baton Rouge who actually is running to be the state party chair to replace Karen Carter Peterson. So he's, kind of an up-and-comer in Baton Rouge. Helena Moreno is an up-and-comer in New Orleans, and they so when she's looking around, of course, everyone loves her now on the Democratic side. But, that's the way politicians are when you think, like, who was with me back when not everybody was with me? Those people often have some stroke. And I think, there was an interesting thing that happened after that, which is Kamala Harris actually endorsed the renaming of Jefferson Davis Parkway in honor of Norman Francis. And you got to think, why would a California senator, vice presidential ticket get involved in something like that? Maybe because Helena Moreno. Maybe also because, and this is another thing that I think is interesting about her, where she might generate a lot of local support. She's a graduate of Howard University, a historically Black university. And, there's, of course, Xavier University, where Norman Francis was president, is one also. And there's just a really strong, tight community of graduates of these schools that just seems really fired up by this choice.
Right. And then, of course,
the other name I want.
Go ahead.
The other name I want to mention is Cedric Richmond, of course, right. Who, back when Helena Moreno was with Kamala Harris, Cedric Richmond had already signed on with Joe Biden. When a lot of people were looking at him, he was the known quantity, and then kind of saying, well, who else is there? Cedric Richmond was with him. He's a national co-chair, which is an incredibly high-level position. He was early. He's gone on television and defended Joe Biden when he sometimes has these gaffes. He's well-positioned to play a pretty major role if Joe Biden wins. There's a lot of speculation that, he could end up at the White House in a White House job, which would, of course, open up his congressional seats so that for people like maybe Helena Moreno, maybe Ted James, maybe other people. So, the dominoes could fall, we went through this when Mark Morial was close to Al Gore, and we thought he might leave when, Mitch Landrieu was close to Hillary Clinton. Right. We thought he might leave, and they didn't. So you don't know. But people speculate about these things.
So convention time is upon us, right? Democratic convention, yes. Such as it will be, is next week.
Yep. And on your computer.
Yeah, right.
Like
all virtual,
else.
Right? And then the end of the month is the GOP convention, such it is,
correct.
As it is too?
Yes. And, Donald Trump the other day, of course, he's got his local connections too. I think you have to look at Steve Scalise, who's been just an avid defender of the president. So, there are locals on both sides with tight connections. Donald Trump last I heard, he's talking about doing a speech on the White House lawn, because he does want a crowd, and that way it can be kind of a socially distanced crowd. It won't be the same, but it would be something.
Not the same as a
So
rally.
these both happen back. Exactly, or a speech in an arena. There was a little footnote in it, something Politico wrote a few months ago that I picked up on, which I thought was really interesting. Donald Trump in 1988, when the Republican convention was in New Orleans, he came and he had a spot on the Superdome floor, and he watched, the festivities and the balloons and the band and just the applause and the applause and the applause for George H.W. Bush at the time. And apparently he was heard saying, "That's what I want." So, there's this idea that maybe the idea for his future run was planted here in New Orleans many years ago.
And that's what he got.
So,
Right.
with that. Yes. And here we are.
Yeah.
Now, I was going to say that convention in '88 was famous for George Bush's statement, "Read my lips, no new taxes," and he got a lot of attention for that, and that haunted him the rest of his time. But the other thing I want to mention, don't you think the time for the day of political conventions is over? I mean, they have lost their drama a long time ago, and they're really media
Errol,
events.
you're previewing my Sunday column. It's all about this, so I hope everybody will read it.
Of course we will.
Yeah.
You've given it a good tease.
So.
Okay.
That was, 1988 was back. I mean, remember, it was a huge economic boost to the city too. And that doesn't really happen anymore because, there's all the security, and then a lot of people stay away and there are all these parties. So local businesses don't always benefit.
Yeah.
So the kind of idea that it's a big get for a city also has faded some.
Okay, we got to move on, but thanks a lot, Steph. We're going to go over to John right now. Demolition, of course, is ongoing now at the Hard Rock, and finally, remains of one of the victims removed.
Yeah, some morbid progress in this Hard Rock demolition. It is obviously late in coming and 10 months in. Last Saturday, I was out there. At the end, I saw one of these demolition workers leave the site saying it was a good day. You kind of couldn't tell that from, the real somber event that was going on in a real quick fashion. It was a sort of a 20-minute period where there was a search and rescue crew that did the ultimate sort of removal of the remains of Quinion Wimberly, a 36-year-old worker who was up there for 10 months, whose remains were up there for 10 months. The family was out there and the mother. And so we still have the remains of another worker up there, Mr. Jose Ponce Arreola. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. 61 years old he was when he died on October 12th up there. That has to come out, the remains have to come out of him, and that's supposed to be a much harder job. They won't give a timetable. Tim McConnell, the fire department chief, won't give a timetable on that yet. Supposedly a lot more intricate of a job is what he says. So that there are possibly more delays coming from that. The last we checked, it was supposed to be demolished, fully demolished in October. There have been delays since, so we don't know sort of the final end date, but things are happening out there. Obviously, you see there are tarps no longer, dangling there, which are sort of the constant reminder of the death that took place there. Those are gone.
The mayor was very, very emotional. Of course, the family was out there, from really they'd been concerned, obviously, all of these months and heartbroken about it, but waiting for the remains to be removed this weekend. And finally, on Saturday, it happened, and just the coverage was just so heartbreaking. The mother was so distraught.
Yeah, and the mayor as well. Truly, she was out there with the family, and very different than how Mayor Landrieu reacted, and sort of he sort of took those moments and was kind of arm around the shoulder. Mayor Cantrell was clearly distraught. She spent a lot of time with this family. It'd been more than 300 days. Right. So obviously she came to know this family very well. And so it was really emotional out there.
I almost got the impression.
And felt it as a mother, too, you could tell.
Yeah.
But, John, there's issues now about the legalities. Of course, there's civil action. Will there be criminal action?
There may be, there may not be. There have been a lot of construction catastrophes like this where there has been criminal action, a lot of times in state court. We don't have much movement on that yet. The mayor has said kind of openly, look, we're waiting for OSHA. They have already cited 11 companies with a variety of violations of workplace safety things. Those are going to maybe go into the civil lawsuits, of which there are dozens. But on the criminal side, the NOPD and state agencies are all waiting on OSHA to issue what is expected to be a lengthy final report that sort of places a more specific blame on different companies and what they did in this. From the and from the construction side of things and the building side of things. Then we do know of federal investigations and state and local investigations as far as Department of Safety and permits, and some of the inspections that were not happening at the site there, and some of the inspectors who have since been suspended or left the department. So that's sort of another aspect of things that we do know that the New Orleans Inspector General, the city, the feds are all looking into. Less we know about what the feds might be doing in terms of criminal charges. We do know that state DA's office, Leon Kenner's office, is sort of awaiting an investigation that is not currently going on as locals await this OSHA report. That in the case of the Florida bridge collapse took 16 months. We're at 10 months now. So at some point in the next few months, we'll get a report, and then we'll see what the new DA will do, whoever that might be.
Civil suits, have those been filed already? Has there been some civil action?
Lots of civil suits filed. Dozens of them in terms of claimants. They're sort of, getting compiled, and there's even a committee, sort of a group that is kind of managing those, almost like you would in a class action at this point.
Okay. All right. Thanks a lot, John. We're going to move back over to Stephanie right now. Elections tomorrow.
Yes. Long delayed, just like in July. This is the runoff for the July primary. Both of these election days were postponed from the spring because of coronavirus. So a smattering of things on ballots in different places. The races to watch, I think, are in St. Tammany Parish, the mayor of Mandeville. That we're going to get a new mayor. There are two candidates who come from the city council. The incumbent Donald Villery was term limited out. Lorraine Sika, Clay Madden. Politics there has been pretty contentious. The council has actually been trying to lower the salary of the mayor. So there was a lot of, one of the candidates, Sika, was a leader in that. And, so it's just been a contentious time. And I think, maybe what voters are looking for, in addition to stances on development and all the usual North Shore issues, is maybe some more common civility. In East Jefferson, there's a very big ballot question to sell the hospital. East Jefferson General Hospital, the community-owned, built, treasured for many decades hospital, is one of the few standalones left in the area. And it's just, they can't compete in the modern medical world. You have Ochsner that has facilities all over. You have LCMC Health, which has facilities in different places. The proposal is for LCMC Health to purchase the hospital and really bail it out of financial trouble and modernize it and create networks across parishes and, keep the employees and fund the pension. And, it's a deal that I think has a tremendous amount of support and no public opposition. And, the civic types are really pushing it, but the voters have to approve it. So that's tomorrow.
Yeah, I think of all the questions on the ballot, all the candidates running for different offices, that is the most important issue on the ballot tomorrow. And that'll be the voters of East Jefferson to decide, because it's a big economic story.
A big economic story,
Huge.
and it's been a while in coming, too, because this has been something that's been developing for a while to finally come to.
And remember, there was an effort to do, sell or link up with a network for both East Jeff and West Jeff. And West Jeff went ahead and did it, and East Jeff didn't. So that left East Jeff even more isolated, frankly.
So to the polls tomorrow, everybody in East Jefferson, to go vote.
Yes. And a few other races, a judgeship in Orleans, that's important because it oversees evictions.
Okey-doke. All right, Steph, thanks a lot. Yeah. Hey, Errol, back over to you and the Pelicans.
Well, the Pelican season didn't end anywhere nearly as people hoped. No. They made this final bubble sort of thing which could have gotten them into the playoffs. And I thought people thought, well, they wouldn't win the playoffs, but they might advance. And they just really didn't do well at all. They had 2 wins, but it was very disappointing. It doesn't end. You hope it would have ended with excitement about the team. Instead, it ends with speculation about the coach being fired. So anytime when you're at the coach being fired stage of athletics, you know that you have good ways to go. And by all accounts, Alvin Gentry was a really nice man, and in the press that worked with him all said just great things about him, but he just didn't win enough. And so that's going to be the possibility. There's all kinds of concerns for all the credit that Zion Williamson got. I was talking to a sports writer last night. And so the problem is he just hasn't been staying fit. And so they really need somebody to really just kind of lean on him on that. The other story this week was about the Saints. First of all, tonight should have been the Saints' opening preseason game. They were supposed to play the Chargers in Los Angeles. Now, to me, preseason game is not a big loss, okay? But at least it should have happened tonight. But, you know, the first 3 games of the Saints season, they open up against Tampa Bay here. And that's, of course, the big story about Tom Brady, who's the quarterback there now. Say, no, that would have been like a huge draw. I mean, they said they're sold out anyway. But if they could have double sold out, they would have. They could play before no one, all right, because of this. Then the second week was going to be one of the big games of the year. They would go to Las Vegas. Everybody get used to this. Las Vegas has a football team now. That the former Oakland Raiders are now in Las Vegas. This is going to be a Monday night football game. They were selling tickets at prices that you could buy a casino with in Las Vegas. It's a big, big ticket item. And it was sold out. A big game, Monday night football game. They're not going to have a crowd for that either. And then they will come back, and they're going to play the Green Bay Packers. And, of course, there you have Aaron Rodgers. So look at these 3 games. You got these 3 marquee games back to back to back. And then for none of them are they going to allow people. Now, the Saints have said maybe if we get down into the season, we're going to start allowing people. By all accounts, the Saints are supposed to be doing really well this season. A lot of people are seeing them as a Super Bowl contender. So if that's happening and if the rules change, maybe by the end of the season, somebody can come in and see him.
Well, we hope so. We're going to keep that we can do a whole lot more too by the end of the season than, you know, get out and live our normal lives a little bit more. Okay, we need to move. We need to move on now. We're wrapping it up. Other news. E, go to you first. USA
Today ranked the top hotel bars in the country. Number 1 was the Sazerac at the Roosevelt. Number 10 was the Carousel at the Montleone. So New Orleans had 2 of the top 10 hotel bars. The problem is the bars aren't open, all right? But once they're open, they're good bars to go to.
But they're still wonderful. They definitely are. Okay, let's go over to you, LeBron, real quick.
I think the one thing that folks are starting to keep an eye on that's gotten everyone's attention certainly is crime here in New Orleans. We've gone through a period of time where violent crime was down for a couple of years there, and certainly murders and all, but this past week, the shootings, 9 or 10 within 24 hours, and then a Mardi Gras Indian queen was killed, got a lot of attention on that. And certainly we still haven't solved the property crime issue of the break-ins of cars in various neighborhoods.
Right. So it is a real concern.
Real concern.
Thanks a lot, LeBron. Steph, real quick for you.
Okay, this coming week, the state is going to start hashing out an election plan for the all-important November election. How much absentee voting, how much early voting, huge contentious issue all over the country.
John, real quick.
Well, we should expect to hear within days from NOPD Superintendent Sean Ferguson on a related crime issue and what he's going to do with his proactive task forces that have been on the shelf for a few months now. He's overdue to the monitor to tell him what he's going to do with them.
Okay, guys, thanks a lot for being here, and thank you all for joining us. We'll see you again next week for Informed Sources. Have a good evening.